Hello and welcome to your next episode where we look at issues facing midlifers, talking to interesting people about their experiences and also getting information and advice from experts. I'm Amy.
And I'm Louise.
And this week we're delighted to be joined again by psychotherapist Jean-Claude Chalmet, friend of the show, regular contributor, and he's going to talk us through relationships and mental health during the coronavirus lockdown. Hello, JC.
Good afternoon from Bali, Louise and Amy.
Wow. So, you're joining us down the line from your retreat in Bali. How are you and how's lockdown there?
Well, it's very interesting. I keep on saying to everyone, it feels a little bit like Greece in the winter. The beaches are locked down, everything is boarded up, everything is closed. But at the same time, we have 31 degrees blue skies and a wonderful sun shining. But the interesting thing in case in point here in Bali is that we are an island of 5.5 million people. We have very strict lockdown and we have to wear masks at all times in public. But we only have 215 cases of COVID-19. We have had 4 deaths and we are 5.5 million people here on the island.
Wow.
So that's quite an astonishing result.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So you're not allowed to go to the beach?
We are not allowed. The beaches are locked off. The entrances to the beaches are locked off.
Oh.
And if you dare to pass the barrier, the municipal police will come on the beach with motorbikes and chase you off.
Wow. But it's working. It's really, really working, this really strict
We believe it is.
There.
I mean, there were 215 cases that have not been accounted for. Of course, you never know whether you can believe the numbers exactly. But overall, what we are all saying here, all of us as foreigners, is that, it's an amazing place to be in lockdown.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a far cry from going to Sainsbury's and it seems like...
I don't know, Amy. I expect Tunbridge Wells is just as nice, really,
I was just going to say in terms of the enforcement of it. I mean, when you do need groceries and stuff, JC, how does that work?
You go to the supermarket covered in a mask, plastic gloves. You are given sanitizer to clean your trolley. You are then supposed to clean your hands with hand sanitizer. And you do your shopping just like everywhere else. And then you clean your cart again as you go out and you load everything in the car and you drive off. And I presume that we do very much the same thing like everywhere else, apart from we are up until now very lucky that there are so few cases.
But I feel like we're being a bit slapdash. We don't, I mean, I haven't been to a big supermarket, but there's no wiping down of trolleys or, is there, Amy?
No, I must admit I've farmed my husband out to go, into the real world.
Some people know how to live.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it's just things that you do see on the news. It doesn't feel like it feels like it's a little bit optional whether you wear a mask or not at the moment here. I think it's going to take a bit of time, isn't it? I mean, it's April 2020. If anybody is again listening to this in a small canister in a desert somewhere, maybe we'll look back on this and say, God, can you believe that it was optional to wear a mask?
Here it is absolutely. There are some shops or places they won't let you in if you don't have a mask.
We should begin by recognising that many people are facing serious consequences of lockdown for their families, health-wise, economically, and maybe they feel right now that they don't have the luxury of worrying about relationships and the emotional issues that we're discussing today. But experts are warning that the effects of lockdown on mental health could be deep and long term. So today, we're going to be talking to JC and listening to advice around looking after ourselves emotionally if we're alone or in lockdown with others. So we've sort of cast our net out and we've asked for questions and noticed there seems to be a shift now from the initial high anxiety when schools first closed and then lockdown happened. People seem to have got to grips on the whole with the practicalities of working from home and homeschooling, but a despairing tone permeated. First of all, people are feeling worn out, tired, lacking in energy and struggling to understand why. What would your take on that be, JC?
Well, I think it's an extremely good question for the very simple reason that we need to go a little back and we need to understand that as humans, we need to prioritize social connection for survival. And my colleague, Dr. Anna Walton, and I in London, in the practice, when we work with, we've been working a lot with people that are suffering severe anxiety in these particular moments. And if you look at it from an evolutionary perspective, we need to develop relationship rules, patterns, frameworks that we can use to function without thinking about it consciously. So, we are very used to that. I mean, we've perfected that over years, tens of years, hundreds of years of how to be. But all of a sudden, we are forced to think about how to behave because we have no experience on how to handle the present situation of being with the same people all the time in the same place. And it is really very difficult for people to bend their minds around the situation of staying at home, either alone or with family or partner or family, partner and children, or a combination of any of those, and how to deal with ourselves and with others and the children without reprieve and not knowing when it will end. You see, this is one of the big things. We don't know when it will end. And for very many people, this is very scary and anxiety provoking.
Yeah.
And, we also need to look that in the past 75 years, it's over 75 years since we've been threatened in our basic instinct of survival. So we have no recollection, we have no examples, we have no experience on how to deal with this. So, we're sort of feeling our way in the dark. And on top of that, we have been living for a long time now, for many people, without genuine connection. We've had lots of distractions. We have friends, parties, life, travel, and so on. So we're all the time about and going, and now we have very few distractions. And we again don't know how to be, how to behave, what to do. This leads to a lot of anxiety because we really have to find out, and we have nowhere to look. I mean, there isn't a manual somewhere that goes, if you find yourself at the mercy of a pandemic and you need to stay at home with your families and your children and your partner that you want to be or not want to be with, then you can do that. There is no such manual.
No.
And it's really difficult for people to, they're coping with their own anxiety. And also, what can I do? What can't I do? If I go out, will I catch coronavirus or COVID-19? What is going to happen to me? Am I going to end up on a ventilator in intensive care? What happens if I get anything else? Where do I go? And so all these stresses and strains are lived out in an aquarium, which is the home.
Yeah.
But is this why? So just going back to the people talking about then not necessarily feeling high levels of anxiety, but presumably there is that underlying anxiety. Why are people feeling so tired? Like if nobody's doing anything really. I mean, I know we're all getting our hours exercise.
I would disagree with you, Louise. I would disagree. I think that people are mentally,
I see,
continuously having to rejig in their minds what to do next, how to handle this.
That's why they're feeling exhausted, do you think, then?
And not only are they feeling it, they are exhausted because they continuously have to readjust, rethink, rejig, reorganize, redo. And, it's really a hard job trying to keep a family occupied and busy and distracted whilst you're dealing with whatever is going on inside you. So I do believe that people are worn out and tired and lacking in energy.
Yeah.
And, and we've never had to do this before.
No.
Yeah. And I guess a common theme is a roller coaster of emotions. I know personally, I can feel 1 minute I'm fairly okay. I feel quite optimistic and hopeful, and I'm enjoying the quality time with my family. And then I'm hiding in the bathroom, crying, feeling tearful, and without really knowing why. Like you say, normally we're in our rat race, aren't we? We're in our routine, and that we're having to recalibrate that hour by hour.
Absolutely. And if you look at it, of course it is the human condition to be hopeful. Even if we're in the worst situation, if we are a hostage or whatever, our minds automatically will go to the point that we are hoping for the best. And in those moments, we feel okay and we can cope. And then we have our internal saboteur or critic that goes, oh, this is hopeless, and look, nothing is happening, nothing is changing, you can't go out, you can't do this, you can't do that. But we should always remember that emotions come and go. They will always change. And so it's very important if people can remember that. Try and distract yourself. And one of the things that I always ask people is that if you're having these down moments, when you're on the opposite side, in the good part of life, even during this time that we're in lockdown, take a sheet, write down all the good things in your life, so that when you arrive in the moment where things are really difficult, that you can just pick up that sheet and look at it and remember.
That's a good idea, like a gratitude list almost, that you can just
gratitude
come back to.
list, or you can come back to and say, okay, it might look very bleak right now, very dark, but I do have this.
And also, I suppose, the more these feelings, this roller coaster of fluctuating emotions, because I'm starting to sort of feel a bit now like when I get very low, and sort of I will just have sort of 20 minutes where I cry and then I'm all right again. But I think I'm starting to go, okay, well, this does keep happening and it does end. I'm not like, I don't then cry for the whole day, and I suppose it's a new thing to get used to.
I think that because we are so devoid very often of connection even with ourselves, that we are feeling our way of what to do next, and then we get very frustrated and we don't know what to do or where to go or how to even handle this. And so I think very often it's a frustration or despair of, when is this all going to end? When are we going to go back to normal? But we also have to remember what was normal. When our normal, what we remember of normal, was also the time when you said, oh my God, I never have time for anything. I wished I had this. I wished I had that. So it's the human condition to always, or not always, but very often want the opposite of what you have, or wanting what you don't have.
Absolutely. What's that about? I mean, I know we've only got a 35-minute podcast, but what is with us humans and feeling like that grass is always greener sentiment, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think it is because it's very difficult for us to connect with ourselves and feeling grateful. And it's something that we have learned, and over time it's always, if we do that we should get that, if we do that we should,
it will lead to that.
It's always a compensation, or it's almost a power approach with life that we do. If I do that I should be getting this, if I do that, it's the good, bad, wrong, right, clever, stupid, it's always that reward thing. And it's very difficult for us to just remain in the moment. You know what they say, if we live in the past we get depressed, if we live in the future we are anxious. And the secret is always to live in the present. I mean, this time hopefully will never come back, that we are in this amount of anxiety and this amount of unknown and this amount of being lost. And we are action driven. So, if we feel lost, we have to do something. Well, now we can't do something. So it really is an amazing opportunity to be with ourselves. And can we do that? And how are we going to do that? And what we advise with people, either here at retreats in Bali, is that people get very anxious because they don't know what to do with an emotion. They're totally unused. And very often when we invite people to sit with the emotion, they go, well, that wasn't so bad.
Can I just ask, what does that mean, sit with it? Does it mean just accept it and just ride it out? Is that am I understanding that? Okay.
That is the absolute correct term. To sit with it and ride it out, because it is going to change. That's 100% sure.
So when Amy talked about going and locking herself in the toilet and crying, is that the same as sitting with it? Is that because
absolutely
that's what I will do as well. I don't want my 15-year-old to see me anxious.
And why
I don't
not?
want him to, because I will.
And why
well,
not?
I said no. Hang on, I don't want him to see that really sort of like I will think, because some of my children aren't with me, and that's what upsets me occasionally. Everything else I'm fine with, and then suddenly I'll just desperately want to see them, and I'll go and shut myself. And I do go and shut myself away because I will have a good old, like a really like wailing, big red-faced blubbering thing. And then if he says to me, "Are you upset?" and I will explain to him, "Yes, I'm upset because I'm missing so and so or whatever."
Yes.
But is it the right thing to do, to sort of give in and just let those feelings just?
Yes, I mean,
yeah.
if you think about animals, for instance, if they've had a big emotional thing going on, they will shake, in order to get the emotion out. Maybe for you, Louise, the crying is the equivalent of that.
Yes.
Do you see what I mean? If a gazelle has been chased by a lion and managed to escape, after that it will sort of start shaking to shake the emotion out. And for you, maybe that shaking is, the crying, to get it out of your system, because that's exactly what you're doing, isn't it?
Oh, that's how it feels. Once I've done that,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's better.
But for those of you, there are going to be people listening to us saying, oh, well, that's all very fine for those that can cry, but I can't. What do I do?
So what do they do?
And they can look at techniques on YouTube and so on of, invoking the shaking, for instance, to get rid of the emotion. Breathing techniques are another way of getting rid of the emotion, of feeling calmer. There's a lot available to the people that are listening, and there's also that are not listening, which will help them, in order to deal with the emotion as it is happening to them.
Right.
It's interesting what you say about trying to protect your son from seeing you crying, Louise.
Yes,
I a few days ago, yet again, I was kind of blubbering, and my 5-year-old said to my 8-year-old, "What's wrong with mummy?" And I heard her say, as she shut the bathroom door, "She's just having one of her moments. Let's go downstairs and play." And I was crying, but laughing, but crying, because she has all of a sudden got this whole new vocabulary, because she is seeing, I can't really get away from them, because obviously they're just like shit to a blanket, these two, they're just sort of staying with me all the time, because, for them, it's a bit of a novelty that they've got me around and dad around all the time. But maybe there is, I don't know if you were going to go on to say that, JC, but I guess that gazelle's offspring would see that gazelle shaking. She wouldn't
Absolutely.
go in a bush and do that. So not, to protect her kids.
Absolutely. And this is how, and I think it's so wonderful that your kids are seeing that. And I think you're going to have quite a bit of trouble of weaning them off, having yourself and your husband around all the time, because that's what kids, do like. It's that security, that safety, that you are there with them, holding them and protecting them. So it's going to be very interesting what happens when this is over, when we all go back to what we term our normal lives.
So do you think children will need to be prepared slightly in a way? They're going to need, you won't just be able to go, right, go on, you're back to school, everything's back to normal. I hadn't thought of that.
I think that we should teach our children in this moment that this is a wonderful time that we can be together, and it's not always going to be like that. But what we can do in those times that you're going to be away, when you come back, we can go back to the time that we're having now.
Well, that's a nice idea.
Yeah, that's a nice thought. Until they start getting right on my tit ends, JC.
you and 3.5 billion other parents.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we had a moment there. We went, "Oh, that's nice," but
No.
Yeah, because as I said previously, children want 100% of your love, 100% of your attention, 100% of your energy. And that's just how it is.
So can we just go back? So the worn out, tired, lacking in energy, that's just because our brains are having to adjust constantly to a very different situation.
I mean, we've never had to deal with a situation like this.
No,
ever.
no. And would that explain why so many of us are feeling... people have mentioned really struggling with almost feeling like they don't care about things that they cared about before, goals that they had, or that sort of what's the point, and really feeling lacking in motivation. Would that all tie in with that? Is it just that our brains
absolutely.
Are having to just focus on surviving in the moment? Or
well, not only that, if you think about it, what is the worst punishment that you can give someone in prison? It's solitary confinement. And in a way, we might be not in solitary confinement, although some people that live alone most probably feel very much like that, because
Yeah.
it's not only about families, and it's also about the people that are on their own,
Yeah.
living in a house or a flat
Yep.
somewhere, and having no social contact. And so we are in a way in solitary confinement, and that plays with our mental health. And it would be normal for people to feel depressed,
So that would
because
explain that lack of motivation that
absolutely,
people are
of
talking
taking
about.
pleasure in the ordinary things of life, because those have been taken away. Having a coffee with someone or going shopping for an afternoon. It's a pretty bleak existence. I mean, you might think that people with a family, at least they have the distraction, they have children, but it's like living in a pressure cooker very often, because everybody has their own anxieties and their own fears and their own nervousness and their own demands and so on. So, it's like living in a pressure cooker on the one hand. And the other hand, for the people that are alone, it's a bit like being in solitary confinement in prison.
Yeah.
Yes, you might have your TV, you might have your phone and your Zooms and all of that. But at the end of the day, you are alone and you can't share with people. And you don't feel the energy of other people, human beings around, apart from your lone trip to the supermarket, where still you have to social distance.
Yeah. I've got friends who live on their own and who have talked about their homes being previously, a real sanctuary from a really busy work life and social life. But now it is just this complete lack of physical contact for them is causing really deep distress. What
Absolutely.
do those people do? Those people that are living on their own?
I would say that they. My advice would be to set up a quite a strict routine for yourself. So if you can, you should have divide your home or corners, if you have a very small place to live, that one corner is where you work, one corner is where you relax, one corner is where you maybe watch television.
Yeah.
And then, you have your bedroom where you sleep, and, you make a program that, no matter how you feel, one day you're going to go walking, another day you're going to do something else, that you have every day you have something in your program. And then you're going to set aside times where you do a Zoom dinner with friends, or you have a chat with a girlfriend, or a coffee with another friend, or, whatever it is, so that you almost live in a virtual social life, but at least you have a chance to vent your frustration or share good things or bad things, but that you still feel part of a community and that you have that connection. My most important advice would be, please, 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 do not abandon your social connection.
Carry on those phone calls, video calls.
Absolutely. WhatsApp, whatever it is, Zoom, whatever it is that you do, it's just a question of you remaining in touch. And remember, you're not only doing that for yourself, because the person on the other side is needing the same. It's not that you're a burden on anyone.
Absolutely. We're uniquely all in the exact same boat, aren't we?
Yeah. I mean, well, can I modify that a little from
Sure.
what you have said? I read something very interesting today, which says, we are not all in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm.
Yes. Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah,
I guess
I
that
read
is
that.
it's also a good opportunity maybe to say, if you haven't heard from somebody for a while, maybe check in with them. I'm thinking of a few
Absolutely.
people that I haven't seen. Usually they're quite active on social media and they're quite active in the WhatsApp group, and I just haven't heard anything. And I really relate to that, because sometimes I do just it's beneficial for me sometimes to just unplug, but you have to, what you're saying is you need to plug back in just to keep in touch with people.
And maybe it's also a good idea with your, what you called gratitude list, to have a contact list of, okay, these are my friends. Maybe I want to speak to this one twice a week, and to this one once a week, and to this one once a fortnight. But that you sort of have a program or a plan of what you're going to do in order to be socially active.
Yeah.
And because I think that, when we are alone, or whatever type of life we have, that we have a program that we know, oh yes, I'm going to do that today. And I think that's extremely important, because you need to have some structure. Otherwise, the days are going to start looking like, the same every single day.
And something else I'm hearing a lot about, and I'm experiencing myself as well, is that some days it feels it's like it's impossible to concentrate. And again, that fluctuates. So reading or tasks that involve thinking will often result in just sort of staring into space for prolonged periods, and then suddenly realising I've got to the end of the day, and for absolutely no reason, nothing has got in my way. I've achieved absolutely nothing, and that's really frustrating. And I'm aware that it's just because I've found it. I just haven't been able to concentrate. Reading has been too much for me. Anything. And I don't know, the day just goes and I think I have just stared into space a lot of the day. And that's so frustrating.
But have you really?
Well, I don't know.
Have you really stared into space? Or have you been so overwhelmed of not knowing what to do?
Yeah.
Of not knowing how to handle it? Because, our brains are like Rolodexes. And any situation that we encounter, it will go through the Rolodex to find a comparable situation, so that at least we have some basis as how to decide how we are going to proceed.
Right.
So imagine that your Rolodex is rolling all the time, but it can't stop somewhere because it has really no comparable data. Which triggers our anxiety. And we know when we are anxious, our minds gets flooded with negative thinking. So we are in that space where we think about survival, and then all we can think of is to run from the tiger in our mind. And we are thinking of a million things without doing anything. And all of a sudden, it's 4:00 in the afternoon, and we think, oh my God, I haven't done anything at all. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I get even more panicky. And then I don't know where to start first. And then I think, okay, I will do that tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to have a really organized day. I'm going to write everything down of what I have to do.
What goes through my head.
And
it's
so,
like a loop, isn't it?
Exactly. You get up in the morning and you think, oh my God. First thing, let's see, maybe they found a vaccine, maybe they found a medication, switch on the television. And we're just adding to the anxiety. And our minds start flooding again, and we're totally lost again. And, does this all sound familiar?
Yes, it does. And actually, when you talk about that Rolodex thing, and when I've had days like that, it's been when there have been extra things sort of worrying me. And I suppose it is just that. So what you're saying is it's like my brain is just having to take time to try and find a situation, like you were saying, it tries to go back to something it knows.
Yeah, something that is familiar.
Yeah,
so
right.
At least, yes, yeah. It's very much like that. I mean, it's different, of course, but I can do this, I can do that because I did that and that worked and that didn't work. But here, and not even our governments, not even our medical services, nobody can tell us, apart from the one thing that we don't want to do, which is self-isolate, don't go outside. If you do, shortest time possible, wear masks on your own. And this is all the things that you don't want to do.
Yeah. And so really, this is just I just have to accept that I'm going to have days that are like that, where my mind is just trying to make sense of it all. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, that is going to change. And the same thing, like the whole situation with COVID-19 will change as well. I mean, if you think about it, that 75 years ago, our grandparents were asked for 5 years, not knowing if the next day they were going to have food or even a roof or a house to live in, if they were being bombed or if they would be alive, for 5 years. And they did survive. All we are being asked is for 2 to 3 months to stay at home in our comfort zones.
Yeah.
It's a very different thing. If we are going to, because I think that sometimes we're very willing to be stern with our children, and say, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that, get on with this, do that. Don't think like that. But it's much more difficult when it comes to ourselves. So we need to use these examples of saying, look, our grandparents didn't want to live like that, but they did for 5 years. And we only have 3 months, and we have, every comfort and every food that we could possibly think of and want most of the time.
It's interesting what you were saying before about what's the worst punishment that you can give to somebody in prison, solitary confinement. But I did read something years and years ago talking about the things that we have discussed in the past on these podcasts with you about sort of mindfulness and enlightenment. And actually, if you are alone with your thoughts, how is that for you? Because if you've got that negative loop going, which is, this is awful, this is never going to end, I don't know what I'm doing, all those sorts of very unhelpful thoughts. It's not
that we all know.
Yes, we are all familiar with them, and sometimes it feels like a battle.
And we have all survived.
Yeah.
And what I think is and you're bringing up a very good point, Amy. And I think, we could try. I mean, nowadays, it's been amazing that during this period, there is so much available online. So much yoga, any type of yoga that you could think of, meditation, mindfulness, connection, everything that you could possibly think of. So, you could try a lot of things.
Yeah.
You could try, I have never seen so many classes.
In a way, that's an amazing thing, isn't it? You've now got access to these people because they are in the same boat and they are reaching out.
And also, have you seen the amount of DJs that are now playing 1 hour a day music? You can find any music that you like. You could tune into it. It won't cost you anything. You can just join and listen to it. I mean, there is so much possibility for distraction, but you have to make that little effort of saying to yourself, okay, what do I enjoy? And what can I do? And I think, that's what I would advise people. Even if you feel hopeless, even if you feel overwhelmed, even if you feel at the end of your tether, even if you feel very isolated, try for your own sake, for yourself, to look after yourself. Ask what you would tell a friend and then do it for yourself. Find a DJ that you like with music, or a yoga studio, or any type of fitness class, or mindfulness class, or meditation class, and do give yourself that gift, because it's there for you.
That brings us quite nicely to this subject that I wanted to talk to you about, sort of loneliness. And it's something that is very subjective. I'd like to ask you about feeling lonely even though you are with others, which feels like something, I think people do feel a lot of shame around admitting that, you can be
surrounded by people and feel lonely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And maybe you're in a relationship that before all this kicked off wasn't particularly harmonious, or I guess there's two elements to my question. I guess if you're in a relationship that was perfectly healthy before, is it a sign of problems in the relationship that need addressing, or is it just a natural reaction to not having other people around in this moment if you are feeling that disconnect?
Well, there are two things. One, I would say that this is an extraordinary time, and I think whatever comes up right now might not be there in 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 9 weeks from now. So I think you would have to wait that out. But what I would really say is, when we feel lonely, isn't it because we are disconnected from ourselves? And I think, this period is a wonderful time maybe to try out various things of how you can connect to yourself. Because if you feel that you are feeling very lonely and you need to go out there, then you're always going to be beholden to that. And wouldn't this be an amazing opportunity for you to try and go inwards rather than outwards? No matter at which stage of life that you are. You might not think very much of yourself. Maybe this is a good opportunity to delve a little deeper. Why do you feel that way? How comes? What is the reason? And again, there's so many podcasts that you could listen to, so many things that you could do for yourself. What are the reasons that you wouldn't do that for yourself? And I think it's so important. I think that every opportunity, every situation brings us opportunities. And, perhaps it's a stage of life that the glass is half empty or the glass is half full. But, there is so much going on around us. I think that, we should be so grateful that we are alive and we don't have coronavirus. We might get it. Nobody knows. But for now that we don't have it, can we be grateful about that and do the best for ourselves? Not for our neighbors, not for our children, not for our grandchildren, but just for ourselves. What can we do to connect with myself? Can I look into something that, might offer me that opportunity? Can I ask a girlfriend what she did? Can I ask a family member, how do you cope? And share and maybe do it together. I mean, I'm in Bali, you guys are in the UK, but we're having a wonderful connectivity at the moment through the wonders of technology. And I personally don't feel the difference that we are 16,000 kilometers away from each other.
I guess we do spend all of our life in the time before, in the normal times. Let's call them normal. I don't know if it'll ever go back to being normal, but we put those layers on, and we create plans and keep going on that treadmill, maybe so that we don't have to deal with stuff that can rise up when we stop. So is that happening a bit, do you think? We have been forced to stop.
Absolutely. I agree with that completely. And then again, when it was, to use your term, normal times, we were crying out loud, to have longer weekends, to spend more time at home, to be with our families, to have that time where I could put the house in order, or, my God, what I would do to have a week at home. And now that you have it, what are you doing with it?
I have to ask about teenagers. Often their friends are their world, and they might have romantic relationships just starting too. And I suppose, what can parents do to help them cope well emotionally at this time, and to try and, what do we need to be aware of as parents and need to understand?
Well, I think we need to step back a little. The reason is that why do our kids, our teenagers, want to be with their peers? And I think it is because, if we look at the whole educational system and the whole way that we raise children, we are very much into a situation where, as parents, we are much more into rewarding good behavior and rather than connectivity. So I think that part of the way that there's a power dynamic that exists between the parent and the children. And then in education, it's the same thing, isn't it? It's, your self-worth is by the results at school, etc. But all of that takes away the connection. So I think that when we look at it from a humane perspective, the reason why our teenagers go and see their peer group is because they can connect at the same level, disconnect from the power dynamic that exists with the parents and with school, through a real connection with their peer group that are going through the same thing. So my answer would lie in that I would ask parents to say, can you try a little to emulate, to get out of, I'm the parent, I decide here, this is what you should do, this is what I expect of you, this is what it is about, I am the adult, I have to make the decisions. Because very often, let's face it, parents might not always be the best emotionally mature beings to tell their children, because where would they have learned it? But that's a topic for another discussion. But, if parents could get a little bit out of the power dynamic during this time and a little bit more into connectivity with their children, then perhaps their teenagers wouldn't miss their peer group as much. They will still miss them, of course, but perhaps not as much.
Yeah.
And this could be a wonderful way of reconnecting with your children and feeling that they are safe at home and they can talk about things without being told what to do or how they should be or how to behave.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really nice way, actually. We're encouraging positive emotions, whilst we don't want to traumatize our kids by letting them see the full horror of the blubbering, wailing, mess that we are when, really in despair. I guess we can just connect on that level and say, listen, we're all in this together, aren't we?
Absolutely. And I think if parents are going to use, because they are stressed, if they are going to use a sort of power dynamic in order to get compliance from the children or the teenagers, it's going to go majorly wrong. Because they're going to just resist harder.
With our older 3 children, Paul and I think we were very much in that sort of, we're in charge. It didn't really work out that well for us a lot of the time. And with the younger one, who is now at home, it's much more kind of like, well, we can't force you to do stuff. But and having discussions around things and when this happened, Paul and I had a discussion about, we just have to take our foot off the brake completely here and just trust him to get to bed in time,
connect.
Do his work, and just have conversations around it.
Yes.
And it has worked out quite
Absolutely.
well so far. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for confirming what I've just been saying with a practical example. Thank you very much.
So long to learn that, though.
Are you saying that I have to have 2 more children to get this parenting thing right,
You've
Louise?
got to have
Is
been
that
doing
what you're
it
saying?
for 30 years before you get it right, I think, in my experience.
Extraordinary. Though. I just wanted to say to our listeners, be kind to yourself. Try to connect to yourself. And if you feel that it's very difficult for you to connect to yourself, perhaps the minimum you could do is when you wake up in the morning or when you go to bed at night, to give yourself a big hug.
Well, thank you so much again, JC. Our listeners really enjoy your episodes, always. And you've provided us with some invaluable insight and understanding today to help us a bit more peacefully navigate these difficult times. So thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Claude.
You're very welcome. Please be well and keep safe.
Made by darkhorsedigital.co.uk. Shooting, live streaming and podcast